Hey, we're back with another segment of MITech TV, and this time, once again, returning to cybersecurity. And there's a never any shortage of things to talk about in that particular area. For instance, Richard Stiennon, who's joined us, along with Dan Lohrmann, but Richard pointed out that United Healthcare got hacked. Let's talk a little bit about that one. That has to hurt really bad because a lot of people use that insurance, right?
Yeah, and it was much, much bigger than that, and that's why the news reports call it massive, because United Healthcare had acquired a company called Change Healthcare, which is the intermediary. It's kind of an IT company that is the intermediary between healthcare providers and insurance agencies. And there's some debate as to whether or not United Healthcare could acquire that right from the antitrust people, because it's healthcare payments for other insurance agencies as well going through this division. A $13 billion company. So they make tons and tons of payments. So guess what? They got hit with ransomware, and that forced them to shut down everything. And that meant that the fall-on effects is that all these small offices, healthcare providers, hospital systems are out of cash, and they're still struggling today.
Huh. Amazing. When will
So,
they
so there,
learn, right?
Yeah, I know.
Go
there
ahead,
was
Matt.
there was the quote in there from one medical practice that said, "After our most recent payroll, we're going to be broke."
Yeah, we're
I
done.
mean,
Yeah.
what do they do? When do they fire it back up, and how much days data is how much days of data have they lost?
Yep. Yep. Well, they're just going to have to do what other, founders have done in the past, including myself. You get that home equity loan to pay the employees. The money's coming, right? That's presumably
You'll
they
be there
haven't actually.
eventually, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, but
should be there eventually. They've got the records and charges, but yeah, it's a big, big, big mess. Um, People are treating it like, this is the cyber Pearl Harbor we've been waiting for, even though it's not, right? It's just exposes the fact that a lot of systems are super critical, and disrupting them has ripple effects that go out through the economy. And of course, that's the case, right? That's the thing about our systems in capitalism in general. It's like nothing exists that isn't critical to somebody. You can't just have things that are disposable, right?
right.
And unfortunately, healthcare systems kind of treat themselves like that. I don't know why, but they treat their IT systems like the bare minimum, just so we can get people in the door, get them registered, routed to the right place. Don't screw up the medications. Get them in the right rooms, whatever. They think that's what IT is for, and they really
Yeah.
miss out on the fact they got to secure all this stuff because it's so critical to them.
Yeah, I was at a doctor's office that shall remain nameless recently here, and saw that some of their diagnostic equipment was running on Windows 7.
Hmm.
Oh, lovely.
So yeah, I'm sure that's not up to date. It's impossible for it to be, right? So,
Yep, yep. Oh
oh
man,
my,
my bank was running on Windows XP when I looked over their shoulder, and
oh good
some
Lord.
and they didn't. It's not like they were logging into their internal systems. They were using a web browser to log into their systems.
So, do we know how the bad guys got in? Was it they didn't do the patches, or was it was somebody clicked on something they weren't supposed to, or how do we know?
Uh, I have not actually seen a description that tells that, but 99.9% sure that that's exactly what happened. Right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would just add, guys, I think the other big thing is there's rumors, and it's not confirmed, that there was a $22 million ransomware payment. Again, it's
Woo.
not confirmed, but part of the answer to your question is, if that were the case, there's a really great article at Politico.com that talks about big questions from United Healthcare or the Change hack and what happened. And we could go through what those questions were, but in there they also talk about officials are not formally answering the ransomware question, but a number of sources have said they paid a ransom, and even it got all the way up to the White House, and they were kind of given a pass a little bit because there's so much health data that could have been lost had they not paid the ransom. But questions like, is the government doing enough to protect critical companies like Change? Again, a lot of people say no. CISA and others should be doing a lot more. Should healthcare companies be required up their cybersecurity? Back to the point you guys were just making. I mean, I certainly think that more of that could very well be coming. You could start seeing more regulation. I know, Richard, you don't think they're very effective, the regulations, but it looks like, there's a lot of people talking about that. What should hospitals be doing? What more should they be doing? And another question, just one more I'll throw out there: is United Health too big to protect? Is it kind of too big to fail, but too big to protect? So many suppliers, so many different people involved in this. Really big challenges. But certainly love to hear your thoughts, Richard.
Yeah, on that, the government is late to the game on educating or getting people to be more secure, right? It's like 20 years late. The best way to educate companies, organizations across the board to do a better job of security comes from the attackers themselves, right? It's like, you're just stupidly vulnerable. Your people click on stuff. You allow them to go to websites that are malicious, and you get whacked and have to pay $22 million fines. Call them fines. It's a ransom, but it's still a fine. Now, they should learn from that. Most organizations would. In a commercial world, they really do, right? TJ Maxx originally, and then Target, just completely whacked. They should have gone out of business. They're so badly run from an IT security perspective. They recovered, and they invested heavily in security, and they are now, some of the exemplars of how to do security well. So does United Healthcare learn from this and start doing stuff? Or do they wait? Do they do what the entire power and grid industry does? It says, yeah, but it's really not our fault, and you should have done more to protect us, or given us more budget, or allowed us to increase our fees for the utilities. It's this just sitting on your hands and not taking responsibility for what you've been doing all these years. You've been taking advantage of IT systems to support the way you run your business. And, whatever the billions of dollars that United Health paid for this exchange, they profited from lack of investment in cybersecurity. And now they're paying the bill. And I think that government come along and say, yeah, you should. I don't think adding fines is going to be as dramatic or as effective as just a continuous education from the bad guys.
Well, and the thing about United Healthcare is AARP is the one that pushes that real hard. So that means the senior citizens like Matt and I are
Not
the
me
ones.
yet. I got a month to go.
Okay, well, are going to be,
Enjoy that month.
they're the ones that's being hit. The people that really need the services can't get access to the services when this is all screwed up like this. So shame on United Healthcare.
Yeah.
Well, all this does to me is make me feel much better about my daughter's career decisions, because she is working in IT security now for a Detroit area automaker that shall remain nameless. And her entire job is teaching people not to do stupid things with emails and attachments and links. So
good.
That's a pretty good career choice right now, I think.
I won't rant on that. I'll let it pass. But okay, good for
Okay, all right.
And this is not new. I mean, I don't understand it. Of course, now all four of us are living in this world, so we're very hip to it. But how is the message not getting out? Don't be stupid. If you get something that looks peculiar, don't click on it. And even when I get something from someone I know, I contact that person and say, did you just send me something? And typically it's the bad guys are trying to get me to click on it. I just got one of those this morning. So, I mean, I just don't understand why all this preaching is falling on deaf ears. Any thoughts on that?
They don't hear it. I came to this realization years and years ago. It was back when, remember when Lowe's was hacked here? And I was writing about it, and you guys were probably writing about it. And, I happen to know one of the guys who was involved in the attack, right? So he and another guy, the hacker himself, were waiting in a parking lot here at Telegraph and 12 Mile. and with a Pringles can and a Wi-Fi connection into
God.
Lowe's, and they were stealing credit cards. And the FBI arrested them and prosecuted them and stuff like that. They were selling those credit cards to Russian criminals. So way back then, right? This is 2002, 2003. So I wrote that up and I said, look at all you retailers, you should be cognizant of what's going on here. This is going to happen to you. 3 years later, that's when TJ Maxx in Minneapolis got hit with an attack from a parking lot using a Pringles can. And that's when I realized, well, of course, they're not going to read my blog. At the time, it was the most popular blog on cybersecurity. I had 300,000 visitors a month. They didn't see it because, I don't have a reach. Nobody has a reach to get to them, except the White House. They're having an impact. White House has reach. Unfortunately, they're saying the things that I said when I was a baby industry analyst. And I said, oh, you got to patch everything. That's all CISA does. Patch, 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 patch. And then just a couple, like 6 weeks ago, they finally went even further. There's a very vulnerable VPN system that's just rampant within the US government. And I'm doing your own transition for you guys. And it was from a cybersecurity company called Ivanti. And they basically banned Ivanti from all the federal government. And that's the first time that they've done something like that, right? Really, really show their chops. It's like, hey, this is too dangerous. Just stop using it. Now, mind you, that's a little bit like saying patch your Windows systems today. It ain't going to happen. You're right. They've got this is a government, right? This is like, remember OPM saw all these attacks coming at them, suspected from China. Their response was to ask for an additional $2 million in funding for the next budget year. And then, of course, they got whacked. And, all of the top secret clearances data for what 1.4 million people was stolen by China. So, of course, the government's not actually yanking Ivanti that weekend that CISA said they had to. And one of the agencies that didn't yank Ivanti was CISA itself, and they got hacked. So a lot of egg on their face for that. I'm not trying to crow about it. I'm just saying it's just an example of, you don't even know what you have, right? So if somebody says, do something if you have this, you can say, well, I don't think I have that, and you're done.
Yeah. Well, let's return to Dan Lohrmann, who is sitting in an airport lounge getting ready to fly to Washington, D.C. to be at the Billington Cybersecurity Summit, where the big topic is going to be election security. Now, that one's near and dear to my mind because all the people that hate all the countries that don't like the United States, and there's a long list of those, are going to be attempting to influence the elections, right, Dan?
Absolutely. And I think, there's a number of different topics we're going to be talking about related to election security and Gen AI. But part of it, linking these topics we just talked about as well, I think one of the other reasons this is so difficult is stopping these attacks is the fake news that are coming out. So I just read again another political article, but leading in one of the ones we're going to be talking about in roundtables, talking with local governments and state governments around election security. But just imagine this, a scenario that they led with. This was actually a tabletop exercise that occurred last month with the National Association of Secretaries of State. So this was a tabletop, and I'll tell you how it ends in a few minutes. But you can imagine this: a false call from a Secretary of State telling poll workers they aren't needed on election day, don't show up, or a fake video of a state election director shredding ballots before they're counted, or an email sent to county election officials trying to phish logins to its voter database. There's a number of other scenarios. They played these out, and we're going to do some of that as well, and some tabletops we're going to be having with chief security officers from all over the country meeting in DC. But the challenge is really deep fakes with new Gen AI type of targeting, and some of these scenarios, really, we talked about this in previous shows, but realistic looking videos. And some of the challenges, just to mention a few of them, but I'll just mention a couple in some of these scenarios that are talked about, and we'll get this to you, Mike, so you can post this out there, and people can read the articles in Politico. It's on Secretary of State AI election misinformation. But the challenge around, you know, who then can get the right information out. So in a presidential election, say, well, it comes from the president, right? Well, people may say that that's partisan, that's trying to stop Trump or something, or, you know, again, so, you know, it's not necessarily easy to correct these kinds of mistakes once this stuff gets out there. And the scenarios honestly did not end well. They were some pretty scary scenarios around election security. And this was mainly around misinformation, but obviously there's a number of other scenarios around actually going after the voting lists themselves, you know, who's eligible to vote, those kinds of things. Yeah, it's really going to be a fascinating set of exercises and steps that are going to be taken.
So what do you think of this more locally here? This lawsuit in Michigan, the charges in Michigan about some election workers and politicians who apparently got hold of some of the election machinery from various counties, took it to some apparently random hotel rooms, opened the stuff up and started, you know, running various what they called tests on the election equipment.
You know, it's a great question. Actually, Matt, I'm not familiar with that story, so we can maybe jump over to Richard. Maybe he knows more details on that. I haven't been reading on that story. I've done a lot with other states. Actually, been traveling quite a bit. So, what are your thoughts, Richard?
Well, it reminds me, you know, I've never been in politics, but I had a good friend back when I worked for Isaiah Thomas. There was a man from Bill Bozeman from Florida, and his family owned a business that did gift certificate stuff and things like that. But he was the former press secretary for Reagan. So, man, did he have stories. And he was like, I don't think Bill even got a college degree, but he did go to school for a little while. And so his college buddies hired him to be a political operative. And so, you know, and I'm sure, Dan, you run into these guys all the time, right? They're people that are like, it's like dorm room antics, or frat antics, and they're constantly doing crap. And I can just see a bunch of wild MAGA type political operatives going, let's go, you know, we'll be heroes. We'll go grab these machines, we'll tear them apart and test them. They have, you know, no competence to do that whatsoever. I know that I think the Pillow guy is being sued by the election machine company because of all the bad things they say about their name. So yeah, you know, if these things were networked and when you typed in you actually typed your votes in or something and they went to a database in the cloud at whitehouse.gov, I'd be worried. I'd be really, really worried. Luckily, our systems are so archaic that they're not massively hackable. I'm sure, you know, anybody can corrupt them, or it's easier to corrupt an official who's tallying them. And I just wish that we would start in a small state, Hawaii, you know, where it's physically distant and not connected, and implement what they do in Estonia. In Estonia, they've had voting by cell phone for 10 years. And everybody has to, you know, if you want to vote to register, you go to the DMV, and you know they take your picture and all sorts of documentation and all that. They wrap it all up in a digital certificate and they put it on your phone. So now when you go to log into the government voting service, you are authenticating it. There'll be one vote per certificate anyways. And the hope is that you've got your own phone when you're voting. And I saw the CTO of Estonia talking, and a use case that wouldn't have occurred to me because I don't have a criminal mind is that, you know, your boss or your husband could look over your shoulder and make you vote a certain way, right? We kind of get that happening here in the US all the time. Well, they have a feature where you can change your vote for 24 hours after you made your vote. So you just go home or go to the bathroom, whatever, and change your vote. And nobody will know.
Interesting.
Well, this is the case to which I'm referring. There's one case that's moving to trial here shortly. A couple others are still being delayed. but there was an attorney for the connected to the Trump campaign named Stephanie Lambert Gentilla, former state representative Dair Rendon of Lake City, Republican, and former Republican Attorney General nominee Matt DePerno are each facing criminal charges. Court documents allege that they were frequently present in Oakland County hotel rooms and residences where individuals performed testing and or experiments on voting machines. It's not clear to me how exactly these voting machines came into these people's possession for this sort of thing. But it's just interesting that somehow they're getting their hands from local election officials on these machines and trying to test them. I'm not sure for what. Now, I called in to the late lamented Voter News Service and the Associated Press election results from the Dearborn City Tabulation Center for about 25 years, starting back in the 90s. And it struck me how hard it would be to tamper with the results, because basically these are the voting machines are really ancient, disconnected computers. They're not connected to anything except they're not connected to the internet. They're barely connected to each other. The floppy disks look like film canisters. This is really ancient technology, and it would be hard to hack, I would think, because they're not, nothing today would be able to talk to them.
Right. Yep. Now, could they have hacked you? Could you have reported the wrong results and swung the state or something?
Well, I could swing, 0.4% of the state, I suppose.
Okay. All right. And then they'd catch it if there's a recount.
Right. Exactly.
But there's like triple check all of those numbers going in too. So it's like, totally agree, Matt. It
would be really hard to rig an election. I mean, like you were saying, it would be easier to bribe an official to get them to do something than it would be to hack the technology.
At my voting center, we use paper ballots that are just inserted into readers, and so you've always got a backup. You got the paper ballot that shows how people voted. So when you do the audit, it's right there. So
paper backups is huge. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'd rather spend my time trying to figure out how to hack the lottery.
Yeah, that would be more. Especially now,
there's some good movies about that.
Yeah.
I mean, a billion here, a billion there, it turns into real money, right? So, but anyway, so the other thing that to be worried about is AI. For instance, in New Hampshire, where they did the Biden call and AI not to come vote or something or other, something crazy like that. And they caught the guy that did it. But I mean, so that was one guy at one AI facility. There's got to be a lot more sophisticated people out there as we move forward into this very interesting election year. So is that a big concern, do you think?
I do. I think it's a big concern. Misinformation, that's really the main focus of a lot of these tabletops. Election officials are going through different scenarios around misinformation using AI and, like you said, targeted into specific, again, you don't necessarily have to do this nationwide. It could be just a swing state like Michigan, right? I mean, going after specific and specific districts, misinformation around directions, and absolutely, that's probably the top concern right now that I'm hearing from election officials.
As they should be. So I hope Thomas Ridd is going to be at the Billington conference. He should be. So he wrote this, just a little tiny pamphlet on disinformation. The complete history of disinformation, active measures. A real page turner, keep you up at night. But it's amazing how long it's been going on, right? It's, and the Soviets can claim a lot of credit, but so can the CIA to their campaigns that they've done. I think the big realm, obviously there's short-term, really, really big concerns for elections. Bank runs could be easily pulled off with disinformation, stock market crashes, things like that. But I think, and this may be pie in the sky, but I think once again, the hackers are going to train us not to trust anything. So we're going to get, last 50 years or 100 years, right? We had the populace trusting what was in the newspaper, right? If it came out in the newspaper, it was right. and that impacted politics and wars and all the rest. And now we're at the stage where anybody can make up any news they want, and we're just going to learn to be not as trusting as we used to be, which is a loss of innocence. But I'm afraid we have to get there.
So you're saying that if it's on the internet, it's not true?
Oh, if I put it there, it's true.
Oh, yeah. People are going to look back on this time and go, they were so stupid back then, so.
Well, I just remember how excited I was by the, about 1991 or so, by the idea that my computer could talk to every other computer in the world. I thought it was going to lead to an age of enlightenment and good feeling and
it did.
lead to freedom.
Briefly, for a couple of years there anyway.
Yeah. It never.
And then the bad guys figured out they could make money, so.
Yeah, that started right from the beginning, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, all right, we're coming down the home stretch here, and I want to respect everybody's time. Let's just ask Richard real quickly. When does your book come out from Wiley again? And you got to get rid of a bunch of them, by April 30th or something like that?
I got to get rid of all the back copies by April 30th. It's coming out June 5th. It's available on Amazon right now. Security Yearbook 2024. And I'm doing a book launch at the National Press Club, probably the first week in June. So you're
awesome.
We have to help you. Maybe we put a code in or something. And if people use the code, they can get a discount on your copies from last year.
Oh, we could do that. Yeah. You to take my books from me.
Take my books, please. All right, Dan, do you have a book out? Or are you working on a book, or what's up?
No new book lately, but Cyber Mayday and the Day After was a bestseller. I came out 2.5 years ago, but still talking about that a lot. No new books. Right. It's a ransomware story.
Write a new book.
Yeah, stories about ransomware, true stories from the eyes of the C-suite. But you can visit my blog, Lohrmann and Cybersecurity, at GovTech.com, and I do a weekly blog on lots of topics like this one right here, election security.